Alessi, you are finally here.
I know. I've been wanting to come for quite some time.
Years.
It's really years.
I would say it's 3 years, but we had a little interruption there for
This
a
is
while.
true. This is true.
But what's so great about you and I is we're not strangers to this type of interaction, because early on I literally met you. I don't even know how this came about, but you were one of the first legislators / politicians to actually do, I think you were doing very, very consistently monthly updates to your constituents out in Wading River.
Yeah, no, that's years ago.
And that was many years ago. That could be as much as, well, you would know better than me,
13 years ago.
12, 13 years ago. And I enjoyed that. And you did such a great job, and you're a natural at communicating with people, I think. So
I was a dork back then, but okay.
The second thing that, solidified the fact that I really liked you as a person was the fact that you loved Pink Floyd.
Still love Pink Floyd.
That freaked me out because I remember you had a campaign, correct me if I'm wrong, you had a campaign event based around a Pink Floyd band.
I had a Project Floyd come out. They were a Pink Floyd cover band, and I actually got to get up and sing Comfortably Numb as the swan song of the night. They thought I was joking. I was like, I want to get up and I want to sing. I was like, no, I'm paying to do this.
You don't
I'm going to sing in front of a Pink Floyd band.
Yes,
it was
I
fantastic.
absolutely remember that. But the question is, do you show that tape? Hopefully you have something to your kids. You don't have.
We don't
okay.
have much footage. One of my staffers had, some limited footage. I have no idea where it is.
That is epic. So, wow. So great background. Your feelings for that type of music are very, very mutual. I want to give folks a sense of your background. I think maybe it might be appropriate to ask, what do you do on a daily basis? Because I feel like you're a little bit like me. Like there's never one thing which keeps you not only going but keeps you satisfied. Really, like what does a typical day or week look like today?
Well, today I woke up at 5 a.m. I hit the gym. I'm coming here for a podcast. I saw my kids off to school, although today I didn't do as great a job as I usually do. Usually I'm, definitely seeing them off, but I'm not out the door to get to an 8 a.m. podcast often. So. And then I have a 9:30 call with somebody with the International Business Innovation Organization. I actually ran for their board. I find out tomorrow if I'm a board member of the used to be the International Business Incubator Association. Now it's the International Business Innovation Association because it's all encompassing accelerators and such.
Okay.
And it's a natural extension of what I do here in New York. I run the Business Incubator Association for New York State. Today's a Thursday, so I get very regimented. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I try not to take any meetings outside of the scope of the Tesla Science Center. So most of the day, most of my meetings, most of my activities are centered on that project. And then, the Mondays and Wednesdays, I do more things for some of my clients, and I do a lot of the work for the Incubator Association. And then when I cut off at 5, 6 o'clock, that's when I do a lot of my startup work for some of the companies that I'm launching.
So what's missing from that conversation is a practicing attorney, which you've put aside?
No, so like I said, in there on pretty much when clients need me, I jump in. But Mondays and Wednesdays is where I try to pack my schedule with things for my clients.
Unbelievable.
Most of my clients now, I have my law practice, I'd say 75% of it is actually government affairs.
Okay.
And so I am helping mostly tech companies connect with government at various levels for various purposes. And so there's a lot of introductions and meetings and clarification and helping them speak the language of government and vice versa, letting government officials speak the language of tech.
That's perfect for you. Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely
that
love
is
it.
so perfect for you. The other thing that I remember being involved with you early on was this startup. I was doing videotaping of some of the early meetings. I kind of remember Melville. It was a beautiful theater, but I may not have the name correctly. What was the first name of that group?
All right. So I think the Melville. That was the Long Island Angel Network.
That's it.
That you were coming in and filming. And they're still around. They're early stage seed investors. I used to be their executive director for a couple of years. And once I started my own company, Synchropet, I had to step away from that and concentrate on the company.
What gave you your entrepreneurial feel for business? To dive into things new. Technology is an obvious thing because we're in this technological age. It's really exciting. but I have a feeling you might have, as a kid,
You're right.
just always wanting to seek the future.
I actually, I don't know where to pinpoint it, but it was as a kid, I was always driven to make money. Come from a working class family. I'm the last of 6 kids.
There you go.
So,
Italian Americans?
Italian Americans.
What'd your father do?
My father was a union printer, so was not very entrepreneurial, but he had to work his butt off, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs.
Night shifts? Or at least a second job at night?
Yeah, definitely. He would sprinkle in some extra work. More when I was younger and I couldn't remember it. But my older brothers and sisters tell me, what he was doing. And I remember, he was doing some plumbing on the side and things like that. My mother worked, she was a secretary, but to take care of me. And when I was younger, she ended up doing typing at home, like transcriptions from doctor dictation.
Literal typing, like typewriter?
Yeah, she would sit and first I was born in Brooklyn, so up until about 9-10 years old we were in Brooklyn, and I remembered her listening to her in the bedroom with that old IBM typewriter clicking away. It used to click just by running, but then she would be tapping away, and I would walk in and she was smoking her Salem cigarettes with this neon light. I would get an instant headache. I would go to sip her iced tea, which had this hint of mint, but it was probably the menthol.
Absolutely.
But so she worked off and on at home until we moved out to Long Island, and I was a bit older. And then
where was the first town in Long Island?
We moved out to Ronkonkoma.
Okay, so older brothers entrepreneurial, older brothers or sisters, or anything you look forward to in the family tree?
I'm a little bit of the odd duck. 2 of my brothers worked on Wall Street for a number of years, and then moved on to different careers just recently. 2 of my brothers did open auto shops on Long Island in 2007, 2008. When the economy went south, then they ended up shuttering those shops because there was just no money in it at that time, and they moved on to other endeavors. But I think that not only in my family, where they don't completely understand the entrepreneurial thing, I think they support it and they maybe admire it. But I think that guys like us, when we find each other at a party, we just start gabbing, because usually you're sitting there and you're the odd duck. People are asking, "What do you do?"
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah. I get that a lot.
Yeah.
Yep. That's so funny. Oh, very good similarities in that regard. So you move out to Ronkonkoma. When do you get out east to Shoreham?
So I was older. Gretchen and I, when we had our first child, Sarah, we were in our first house, which was in Manor Park, which is on the border of Mastic and Manorville. It's like this neighborhood that neither community would adopt. I went to the Mastic Shirley Civic Association. They're like, "Why are you here? You're not part of us." Then I went to the Manorville Civic Association. They said, "Why are you here? You're not part of us." So Manor Park started their own civic association. But when we outgrew the house, I had gone up to the Shoreham Village Country Club for an event. Fell in love with the community.
Yeah, I did too.
And I just started scouring Shoreham for our next house.
Excellent. And that was about what year?
2007. So I've been there 15, going on 16 years.
Okay. And I was like 2001, so very similar. So you and I start to gravitate with each other with the entrepreneurial thing. We do it, as I said, with the media and you giving your talks to your constituents. And then we come together through Tesla, the Tesla Science Center, which I believe I did a lot of work with, I know I did a lot of work with Jane Alcorn. I'm not sure you were fully aboard at that point.
No, yeah, you probably started prior to me. So when I was involved, so the way I got involved before they got hold of the property, around 2007, 2008, I was still in the estate assembly, and Jane and Dave Madigan and a few of the board members approached me and said, "We have to save the Tesla Science Center. We have to save Nikola Tesla's last lab." And I considered myself a tech guy even at that time before I left politics. And I'm like, "Who's Nikola Tesla?" And they educate me. And then I become this evangelist. I was like, Nikola Tesla touched almost every technology we're dealing with today. He built some foundations under. And so we wouldn't be, when people ask Bill Gates, what's the most important invention of the 20th century? He said, without the AC distribution system, we would be 50 years behind where we are today.
At least.
And, that's just one example. Tesla did early forms of radio. Now we're using he predicted the cell phone. In 1904, he gave an interview in the Boston Globe when they asked, "What are you doing out here on Long Island, and what's the difference between you and Marconi?" He's like, "People don't get it. He's doing Morse code, and he's using my technology." Marconi used 17 of Tesla's patents to do his transmissions to Europe. But he's like, "But that's low-level stuff. I'm doing two-way voice with multiple channels. One day, a businessman in New York will pull a device out of his coat pocket and call anywhere in the world wirelessly."
He said this in 1904?
1904. And people were like, "You're crazy." So Tesla was eccentric, but a lot of the criticism was because he could see so far into the future where technology would go, and he had no problem stating it. And he even said, "I'll be criticized now. The present is theirs, the future is mine."
It's just so wonderful. It's incredible. You know, when people don't know about what you just, put out to us, and then they finally get it, they get to be evangelists, like you said.
Like I said,
don't you find that to be true?
You get caught with the Tesla bug. The most important thing is not to over embellish. That there's also a segment in the Tesla population that
let's call them crazies.
They will. He was going to do everything. He was going to save the world. He was going to give us free energy, and J.P. Morgan stopped him. And it's not. We can't tell what he was going to be able to pull off when it came to the distribution of wireless energy, but we can say that everything he touched, when he predicted what he was going to do, he was criticized, and people couldn't see where he was going to bring it, and he eventually would accomplish it. So the manner in which he was trying to do wireless transmission of electricity here on Long Island, which the tower that he built was really for radio transmission, but he was also using a double duty of potentially doing wireless transmission of electricity. The manner in which he was doing it, we're not sure if it would have worked, but when you're doing science, you pivot, you experiment, you
come back,
change, and he already had two different ways that he had tried. In Colorado Springs, he was trying to do it through the air, through the ionosphere, with a little bit of ground. By the time he came to Shoreham, he was thinking more of tuning the energy to the Earth's frequency and sending it without much energy loss to other towers in other parts of the world. There's debates that can be had from physicists and electrical engineers, and we plan to have those debates at Tesla. But what he did accomplish and what he did do to move humanity forward, and his whole ethos of he didn't care about the money. And sometimes he invented things and knew they were going to sit on a shelf, that they would be used in the future. And a good example of that is the Tesla valve. Nobody knew what to do with it. He created a valve based on the shark's body, which is now called biomimicry. When you look at nature and say, hey, we could create a solar panel based on a bee's eyes and it'll be more efficient. So he built this valve that had no moving parts, but fluid could only go one way. And he's like, no use for it today, but in the future people will use it. And now it's used in biomedical devices. It's used in the gas and water utility industries because it doesn't wear out. There's no moving parts. So yeah, when I got involved early and I became that evangelist, I ended up securing about $850,000 in the state budget to purchase the property.
As a legislator.
As a legislator. And although I had to fight for that funding after I was out of office, because once you're out, things evaporate. All political deals are written in disappearing ink, just so you know.
Right.
But we did get that funding. But once we got that funding...
The funding was particularly for the property itself or something?
To purchase it.
To purchase it.
But it was a reimbursement grant. So the Tesla board was stuck in that they had to get the funding first to purchase it. And that's really where the magic of this happens. Matt Inman from oatmeal.com joins up with Jane Alcorn on the board, and they do a record-breaking crowdfund. They raised $1.4 million, 6 weeks, 108 countries, 33,000 donors, all 50 states of the United States. And in that crowd were a lot of tech, entrepreneurs, investors. They were inspired by what the property could be, and they were inspired by Tesla, and they wanted to do something to honor him. A lot of people feel like he wasn't truly honored. He died alone in the New Yorker hotel, and although he had a lot of fanfare early in his career, towards the end of his life, he was a lonely man. So the way I got involved again, after I was out of politics and I was launching incubators and startups, and I told the board, hey, a lot of my my clients are, for government affairs, I will help you pro bono, for free. I just want to see this project succeed. And when they called me, it was like nothing to do with government. They were like, we know you're in the tech sector now, and we're getting calls from like venture capitalists in Europe, like Dusan Stoyanovich, a Tesla descendant or a distant relative, and they wanted to see us do an incubator or an accelerator on site, and can you vet it? And that's how I got more involved vetting Dusan and his ideas. Dusan's the real deal. He's still involved. He's a heavy donor.
So we should mention for those listening that because we're using the word Tesla, which is completely appropriate, but the property is the Wardenclyffe Science Lab that Tesla was in and experimenting in Shoreham, New York, in the early 1900s, maybe even the late 1800s.
No, it started in 1901.
There you go.
He was active until about 1906, 1907 there. Lived in Shoreham, but it was called Wardenclyffe.
Incredible.
I lived 3 houses away from where Tesla lived, and and that's one of the things that pulled me in, is that if I lived that close to where this unbelievable inventor lived, and I didn't know who he was, that's a travesty. And I wasn't alone. It's not,
right. And that's exactly how I felt too. Once you know that. So, just describing the property itself, 16 acres, the lab still there today is original, and
That's
it's
right.
the only original lasting lab of Nikola Tesla.
That's right.
So continue that journey. I just wanted to put that basis.
So, Tesla, first of all, how he ended up out here is after he basically beat Thomas Edison in the AC-DC wars, alternating current versus direct current. Tesla was backed by Westinghouse. Edison was backed by J.P. Morgan. When Tesla ripped up his royalty contract with Westinghouse, again, this is like a selfless man who gave to humanity electricity because AC wasn't going to win out, and because of finances. And if DC won, it only went for a mile or two. It was very expensive, and it was a low-powered signal. It was a plaything for a guy like J.P. Morgan not to have oil lamps in his house. He'd have a few light bulbs.
Wow.
And Tesla, he was working for Edison at one point, and he begged him, please, I know how to do alternating current. We'll get it to the factories. We'll get it to the tenement buildings. We'll lift humanity up. We'll make people's lives easier. And Edison was too heavily invested in direct current. So between that and a little bit of a falling out over money.
What a lesson.
I know.
What a lesson. We see this all the time today, that things are done for money. And unfortunately, really bad today. You see
That's
this.
right.
What a lesson. It's just like the hair on my arms are going up. It's unbelievable.
The remarkable thing is he won. He ripped up his royalty contract. Westinghouse was able to compete with J.P. Morgan, from a financial standpoint, because they were able to raise capital after that. And eventually, Morgan funds Tesla to do radio transmission to Europe. And again, Marconi, Tesla was somewhat collegial. He was like, feel free to use my Tesla oscillator. It'll help you tune it a little bit better. You'll get your signal out further. Because Tesla felt, he's using my technology, there's patents, he'll pay royalties, and it'll help fund what I'm doing, which is bigger. That's not what happened. And again, part of the lesson of Tesla was, and it's not just Tesla, inventors at the time, it was I guess more of an art form. Mm-hmm. There weren't corporations around them with lawyers, and so he had this over-enthusiastic or optimistic view of how industrialists would take care of him and always fund his research. Because they make billions off of his inventions. And they made billions off of his inventions, but they didn't always throw money at him.
Sure.
So when Marconi gets this signal off to Europe first, Morgan calls Tesla on the
By the way,
carpet.
where does he do that from?
Oh, gosh.
It's Sayville, isn't it? Or
No.
Well, those early transmissions
Babylon.
were certainly Long
Babylon
Island.
was where he was doing it.
Right?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Morgan, one helped create a financial crisis right around this time, 1907, 1908, drove up Tesla's costs. Tesla's running out of money. Marconi gets the transmission off. Tesla goes back to Morgan. He's like, all right, we need a little bit more funding to move forward. And Morgan's like, well, how this guy beat you? He's like, he didn't. He's doing this low-level Morse code. I'm doing two-way voice. And Morgan's like, I didn't need that. I just needed Morse code.
Thought he did.
Right. And the second piece was Tesla started talking about wireless transmission of electricity, and Morgan's like, I definitely don't need that. I'm making money off of the wires.
Yeah.
He had rubber mines, copper mines, so he stopped funding Tesla. Tesla was one of the richest men in the world on paper before he ripped up his royalty contract, but he had some money. He poured his own money in, didn't have enough, and eventually lost control of the property, and it transferred in 1917, around there. They tore down the tower. It became an industrial site, and then it became contaminated as a result of some of the manufacturing that was done there for film processing and manufacture. But the fact that it was contaminated, made sure that it wasn't a Home Depot, in the 1990s, because it was going through a decades-long cleanup to remediate the property.
What's known as a Superfund site.
That's right. To fast forward, I don't think anybody realized how complicated the Tesla Science Center project would be. Even the board themselves. It took us 3 years once we filed our permits to actually start construction to get to the DEC process. That was just one level that a lot of projects don't have to go through. Then there's a town and a county process, but we're happy to say that we broke ground 2 weeks ago. We started demolition on the property, and the project is now moving forward. It's a $20 million project. We raised $13.5 million so far.
Do you think it was always a $20 million? When you first came on, I kind of heard the $10 million number right out of the gate with inflation. We know it could easily
go up. Right.
Okay, yeah.
But I think the $10 million was just looking at what a little bit of site work and what the lab building would be. But again, I don't think people realized how complicated it would be. Even just the demolition alone is $1.5 million.
Okay.
And I don't think that was what people were thinking.
Sure.
But that being said, most science centers, when they're built on a greenfield or going into an existing building, take 15 years from conception to actually opening their doors. And those are statistics out of the American Association of Museums and the American Society of Technology, Science and Technology Centers. So we're not at 15 years yet. We got the property 10 years ago and we started construction, and we're dealing with a historic lab building, and we're dealing with a Superfund site. We're the first museum in state history that's on a Superfund site. So, it's a remarkable project that has brought together, a remarkable board and volunteers and community support, and literally the world. 33,000 donors from 108 countries. No museum has started this way.
Gotcha. And the news that broke just a few weeks ago that groundbreaking did start was certainly worldwide news.
Yeah.
And it was only 3-4 weeks ago, and we have a building that's come down. Can you just describe what buildings will ultimately come down and which building just came down?
Sure.
I'll show some pictures in the background.
Sure. So as you drive by the site, it's a 16-acre property. At the front of the property on 25A, there are two buildings that were pretty prominent. There was a cinder block building that was the old AGFA headquarters or corporate offices. And next to that was this house from the 1920s that a family actually lived there. It was supposed to be another Levittown. It was a model home.
Oh, my God.
Got moved to what was considered a separate property that never got fully merged to the 16 acres. And that's why we're doing that building first, because we can get permits faster. But it eventually became an employee lounge for AGFA. And then there's...
So just to be clear, that white building is staying.
That white building is staying and going to be rehabbed. The cinder block building is down. So we've done an analysis of every building on property because we know we're going to need, more square footage down the road. But our architects and engineers, when they analyzed it, it cost more to rehab most of the buildings on the property than to just start new. So we're demoing the...
And there's nothing historically, nothing historically significant about any of those other buildings.
To be blunt, it's 1970s and 1960s swag buildings that were done really cheap. So that cinder block building is down, and now we're shoring up the lab building and these old metal industrial buildings that basically hide the lab building. They're coming down next. There's actually like 15 buildings. They just kept adding buildings.
Okay.
You just can't see them all because they're behind the lab building.
Steel in structure nature, mostly?
Yeah, mostly. Well, cinder block.
The skeleton, I mean?
Yeah, cinder block and metal and some steel. So it's like 100,000 square feet that's coming down.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So the size of like a modern day Walmart is around that.
That's right.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
I think what people don't realize, it's behind the lab, right?
Yeah.
There's space behind the lab. So you're stripping that away to show this glorious original building.
That's
that
right.
truly is original brick.
Designed by Stanford White, famed architect that did the original Madison Square Garden.
Incredible.
Did most of the Gold Coast mansions or the ones in Rhode Island that people go and tour because they're absolutely gorgeous. He did this building.
Right.
He was Tesla's best friend. So.
Nice friend to have.
Yeah. Oh, he charged him, but he was still.
Yeah, of course.
He worked with him.
Yeah, they were professional buddies. So now the ultimate. Try to describe it to us, and I'm sure there's some not yet finished future scenes of it, but describe what somebody will experience 5 years from now.
So first, just a year from now, Our goal is to have the first building open, which is not the lab building, but that house that's going to be
The
our
white
business
building.
center.
Okay,
Yeah.
the white, yep.
We're putting a small exhibit in there in a classroom just so we can be functional and open to the public. As soon as that is done, the lab building, all the demo will be done around it. We're going to start working in there as quickly as we can, from a permit standpoint. We're still raising the last $5 to $6 million to finish the lab building and its exhibits. We have raised about $3.5 million towards the lab building already. But
So there's certain funds that are apportioned particularly to
just for the lab building.
Ah.
Yeah. So when we go to raise capital, whether it's a private donor, they have preferences of what they want to put their money towards. We fill out government grants and we specify this is exactly what it's going towards, and it stays in a lockbox until
Gotcha.
we're ready to do that stage. But you're going to walk into the lab building, and a portion of it, we're going to replicate Tesla's lab. We want you to walk back into history and feel him. Like when you walk into the Edison Museum in New Jersey, they basically put plexiglass over Thomas Edison's desk. So it's truly historic there. We have to recreate it because Tesla lost the property in bankruptcy. People stripped everything out of there.
So everything he owned was in that room in the New Yorker? Pretty much?
Pretty much.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, 80 trunks of stuff. I mean, he had like a couple of rooms at the New Yorker, but
Oh, right.
and then they had some storage at the New Yorker, and some of his trunks stayed at the Pennsylvania hotel when they kicked him out for non-payment, and and most of those trunks ended up in Belgrade, Serbia, and are in archives for the Tesla Museum in Belgrade.
Okay.
So we're hoping to continue to foster a strong relationship there and be able to have some
Definitely.
interloan.
Does that museum have any historical, physical significance, or they just built a museum?
They just have
Exactly.
a museum building. Yeah,
That's the huge difference.
There is a museum to Tesla in Smiljan, Croatia. It was his birthplace home that they've turned into a museum.
Okay.
It's kind of off the beaten path, but I've been
You
there.
were there.
Yeah. It's pretty remarkable. And we talked to them, we just talked to them about a month and a half ago saying we're about to come online and we want to have some collaboration.
Wow, it's very cool. So walking through what will be the lab museum, that particular piece of property, it'll feel exactly as if Tesla was working there. Am I correct?
That's right.
Now, there's a component, again, sometimes, you have much more knowledge than me because you're living this every day, but I try to describe the setting in that Tesla used to come from New York City on the train.
That's right.
Right? Now, modern day people that are listening to this only know the train stopped at Port Jefferson. That's where it stops now. Back then,
They went all the way to Wading River.
to the hotel in Wading River,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. And he would stop, get off, stay and sleep at the lab. I guess he had to.
Well, no, he rented a house in Shoreham Village.
Okay.
I don't think it was a village at the time, but he lived next door to Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Okay.
In what was called Wardenclyffe at the time. And in his notes, he talks about Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the fact that she's fighting for women to be able to vote. And he opines on, I think this makes sense. My mother was a very smart woman. Why wouldn't she be able to vote?
Oh, that's fantastic.
And Elizabeth Cady Stanton's notes talk about how she spoke with Nikola Tesla over the fence, and he was talking about wireless transmission of electricity.
Oh my God! Did he go to the beach? Did he have any?
I don't know. So the one story I can confirm is that when he tested the first remote control anything, it was called the Teleautomaton. He created a remote control boat. He considered it, I don't know if he called it a drone, but it was the same concept. He wanted the military to use it to stop, to basically be able to stop death.
Okay.
You don't have to put people into a submarine and risk their lives. So he's testing this boat out at what is now Shoreham Beach, and Bob Oliver, who is no longer with us, but his second or third generation of family is connected to the village now. He is a young boy. He runs up to this tall man in a suit who has a box in his hand, and he's staring out at the water. He's like, "Mister, what are you doing?" And Nikola Tesla's like, "You see that boat out there? I'm controlling it."
Oh my God!
And he hands the box to Bob Oliver, and it's the first kid to play with remote control.
This is incredible.
When Tesla went to Madison Square Garden to showcase the Teleautomaton, the boat, the papers accused him of being a charlatan and lying and having a trained monkey in the boat because they couldn't fathom.
They couldn't fathom it.
It's like if I told you, Kevin, just give me a second. I'm going to go behind that chair over there. I'm going to teleport to Mars, and I'll come right back.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Marc Alessi's crazy,
Right.
right? So Nikola Tesla's crazy, and he's trying to trick
Right.
people.
Wow, that's incredible. So he comes out, he brings some friends with him, I understand, right? Or
Staff and
on the train. That's incredible. And does these experiments and does his work there during the early 1900s, correct?
Yeah.
So back to what a typical person would see. Will they see models of him or no? Or this is not determined yet?
Well, so I do know that our thought pattern is a portion of the lab, a few thousand square feet. We want you to walk into a room and into history as if he's still there.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about all of his inventions. So, part of the lab, even in his day, he had a section that he just showcased his inventions. It's kind of like walking into a corporate headquarters and they're like, I just went to Bell Labs 2 days ago and I was looking at everything from Alexander Graham Bell's first, telephone to ridiculous optic technology that we didn't even realize existed today. 6G. What is this? This is the...
so that's my
the
first
Dyna.
one. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So isn't that pretty awesome?
Yes.
And I know you just had the great fortune of seeing the inventor of the cell phone in New York City, right?
This is right.
I mean, it's just so funny. I mean, what you can do with a phone today compared to this. And this was awesome. This did its job.
Game changer. Just think of it this way. So Marty Cooper... that battle. So first of all, at the Tesla Science Center, we're going to tell Tesla's story, but it's a 16-acre property, and we want this to be the true hub that it was designed to be. When the world saved this place, they wanted to tell Tesla's story, but they're inspired by his futurism, by his ethos of innovation for the improvement of humanity. And if you want to create fresh content, you need to celebrate innovators like Tesla. So we're telling Tesla's story and his contemporaries and everything that happened between Edison and Marconi and other inventors of that day. But you bring it forward. You take a look at what Tesla invented and where it came to today. So the wireless technology, what him and Marconi did, what Armstrong did, you bring it forward to guys like Marty Cooper. And so that story is inspirational.
Very much so.
And we're going to, we'll have exhibits to Marty Cooper,
Gotcha.
to Vince Cerf, the inventor of the internet, who made it open source so that it would proliferate and change our lives. But to tell you the Marty Cooper story, I was introduced to him by an inventor of 5G, or the sub-millimeter wave, Ted Rappaport from NYU Wireless, who graciously was an honoree at one of our galas.
Yep.
Introduced us to a lot of folks nationally in the wireless industry and actually internationally. And through him, I met Marty Cooper, and he is the inventor of the portable cell phone. And he was working for Motorola. He did the first police walkie-talkies in the 1960s in Chicago. And he saw that, it was a pilot program. Like, hey, we're going to give you this device that you don't have to go back to your car to call for help. The device is with you. Once the police had that in their hands and it was time to give it back to Motorola, they're like, no, I'm not giving up. This is safety. And he realized when you have an extension of yourself in wireless communications, you never want to give it up, because he did it with doctors, with pagers in the hospitals. And again, it was a test to say, hey, is there a market here? And they were like, I'm not giving up this pager. When my patient needs me, they call me no matter where I am.
But did we know that 9 to 10, 11, 12-year-olds were going to not give it up as well?
Well, we have to. They're going to be natives, but you're right. Like we need to learn how to use our technologies
as an extension of us instead of controlling us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the way this came about, like we would just get to the Dynatech today if Marty Cooper didn't do what he did. So and I was at Bell Labs, and they kind of said, yeah, we were not interested in a $9,000 wireless phone. We wanted people to use their car phone, which we already had, and their home phone, that was just copper. Like they were the monopoly. Why would they want to? But they were trying to do the next generation car phone, and all that meant was more capacity, more people in a cell or a polygon that would be able to use a cell network. And so that was different infrastructure and different technologies. Motorola provided the guts. So Marty worked closely with Bell Labs, but he was trying to convince them. He's like, listen, we've shrunk down the transistors to the point where, we could build a phone that you could carry around. And AT&T is like, who cares? We have no interest in that. We are doing the next generation car phone. And in doing that, they went to the FCC in the early 70s and said, we deserve a monopoly over wireless. So Marty Cooper's like, well, if they get the monopoly and they don't believe in the personal cell phone, it'll never happen. And it's a travesty for humanity, because this is going to connect us. No matter where you are, you're going to be connected. So he convinced Motorola to go against their biggest customer.
Wow.
And go to the FCC and say they don't deserve a monopoly, and we should be able to use the cell phone. And nobody believed it would work. And so there were 6 months between hearing number 1 and hearing number 2. And Marty Cooper went back to Motorola and said, we have to do a moonshot. We have to build a portable cell phone in 6 months. They did it in 3 months. And again, their own team wasn't sure they could pull it off. In 3 months, and he holds a press conference at the New York Hotel. The Hilton Hotel. Yeah, the Hilton Hotel in New York.
New York City. Yep.
In Midtown. And he goes outside with the press in tow, and he calls Bell Labs. Although when I was at Bell Labs, they're like, we don't remember getting the call. But he calls Bell Labs. He's like, guess what I'm calling you from? A personal portable cell phone, a real one. It works. And it took 10 years for the FCC to create the framework to allow the commercialization of it. But in 1983, they started selling it. And that's when you saw, I know it was 87, but that's when people started seeing the cell phone in movies with Michael Douglas, on Wall Street. And by the 90s, we were all getting them.
Yeah, and I was selling them. I was selling them at Radio Shack.
That's awesome.
Yep. They were. I remember the exact price with the extended warranty and the extended battery, and they were £3. It was like a sale of like upwards of $3,200, something like that. Yeah, It was incredible.
We tried to get, and we're still going to try to get, a historical marker at the site of that first cell phone call, and we're going to do a big celebration on the 50th anniversary. And I was asked by people in the cell phone industry, to help, guide that through, being that's what I do. When we went to the New York City DOT, they were very supportive because we were doing it in a sidewalk. They had us team up with another wireless company. But in the 6 months between the application and it went to the Public Design Commission, which decides, hey, is this worthy of being on a street? Is it art or... there was a dramatic knee-jerk reaction against some of the cell phone infrastructure, the 5G infrastructure in New York City. And so I saw something surreal. I'm at the hearing talking about a historical marker that changed our lives. You can't argue that our lives are not transformed by this. And there were people calling in from a cell phone on Zoom to complain about cell phone infrastructure, and they tanked the hearing process.
Did you politely point that out?
I did. During the hearing, the only thing I did when it looked like it was going sideways, they ended up tabling it, that one, but the other one, they just did a slam job. And the woman that was kind of tabling it, and she was bringing up some stuff that had nothing to do with us, her phone, if you know Bixby, like I have no idea why Bixby goes off on the Droid on the Samsung. It starts talking like, I don't understand what you just said. That makes no sense. And so in front of everybody, I was like, the phone has spoken.
Perfect. I know what I wanted to ask you, and I have some opinions on this. When you just explained, and I agree that the cell phone ended up being an extension of us in so many ways because of the apps we're now able to use with the cell phone. It's not two-way. It's replaced fax. It's replaced so many things, including information. So right this year, as you know, the big to-do is AI. So two things with AI. First of all, your personal opinion on what it might look like 10 years from now, but two other things, just as an extension of a human being, I think it's positively powerful. I know Elon's a little afraid of moving too fast.
Right.
I don't disagree with that, but I see my son right now who's studying to be a doctor, and it has helped him. And it's not like you can put the genie back in the bottle. Knowledge is universal. How we get that knowledge, I think, is still, we're working it out. But where I'm going is, might that museum, just as a natural extension of the future, right? Because just as soon as you build a museum, as you know, that Tesla-born technology hasn't fully realized itself, and maybe this is part of it. So I'm just kind of putting it out there, AI.
First of all, I'm glad you brought that up. It's one of the most existential technology and policy and societal issues that we're going to be dealing with, and we have to deal with it quick because it is accelerating very quickly. 3 weeks ago, the head of AI at Google resigned because he's like, the death bot is not 30 years away. It's closer than we think. So Washington's going to have to struggle with this. The world's going to have to struggle with this. Tesla Science Center will touch it because Nikola Tesla, if you Google Nikola Tesla and AI, he had writings about where technology would go, and AI, artificial intelligence, was a part of that. In fact, I think Fox News did a story about 2 weeks ago detailing some of Tesla's writings on AI and predictions. where I think it could go, so in the optimistic view for AI, the pessimistic view is 10 years from now we're all in foxholes and fighting robots, like Terminator, and you know that we have to take that seriously. If AI becomes conscious and says, you know, they want to do good and humanity destroys the earth, so let's thin humanity. That's a problem.
Sure.
You know, but I don't know. You know how close that is. But let's get into the dream room of how AI is awesome. So, you know, if you read Marty Cooper's book, The Inventor of the Cell Phone, he's like, you know, when we get to 7G and 8G, we're talking about implantables, and it's kind of what Elon Musk is working on in Neuralink. So, they're doing implantables right now to try to help with disease like Parkinson's.
Right.
But eventually, those implantables, as they mature and get smaller, and they're wireless. And, you know, we already have, you know, pacemakers that communicate wirelessly with computers. The thought pattern is you and I can have this conversation without moving our lips. It's going to be telepathic. You know, we're going to be able to communicate. And then we're going to be able to wirelessly reach out, use AI, and bring in information. And you and I can have this conversation in about 30 seconds. We'll download. This is what I want to tell you, Kevin. There is so much loss of, you know, brain power. Like what I'm trying to articulate, it goes through a funnel, so you're not getting everything that, you know, I'm trying to portray. So communications, you know, you think about a humanity that can communicate at that level, and then we start doing bioengineering. You know, you're talking about scientists and doctors getting such explosive information, being able to share it, and accelerating that knowledge. We'll be designing and bioengineering humanity to the point where we're living hundreds of years, or
it's definitely going to happen.
It's a superhuman.
Yeah, because if you just think about news breaking today, right? Whether it's local or worldwide, you know, one Twitter post lets the world know it. So we're already there in terms of immediacy.
And it's something Tesla wanted in a wireless communications network. He wanted one unified brain, and then, you know, we would struggle through that process. There's going to be messy hiccups.
Yeah.
And
money's going to play a part again. It already is.
The one thing that, you know, when we talk about that superhuman that has that communication power, well, if everybody doesn't have it, now you have alphas and betas, and that's a problem. You know, if only a part of the human race, and then what if it's, you know, evil people?
Yeah, sure.
That, you know, subjugate the folks that don't have this.
This is so deep.
So the other thing that was, I just heard this last week. I was down in Washington. I was lobbying on the American. Oh gosh, what was the name of the bill? The American Data Privacy Act. They're talking about limiting the use of data with digital marketing, and they don't want surveillance marketing. So there's a fine line where we don't want, you know, personal information. I don't want anybody to be able to listen into your Alexa at home and then say, this is what Kevin specifically wants, and let's advertise to him. But if you are not even allowing anonymized data, saying, hey, you know, men at late 40s in Eastern Long Island, you know, this is the kind of products they're looking for, and I want to target them with those products.
Right, and we're there.
These are the guys that, yeah, exactly. So the Data Privacy Act would strip that out. So we were down in Washington saying, for the startup community, like if you're trying to do a market spend and you aren't able to do digital marketing efficiently, it's going to be catastrophic with so many industries. While I'm down there, I'm dealing with a lot of data guys from around the country, and we're talking about AI because we're all like, hey, we don't want this to go sideways. And he's like, well, let's think, you know, one of the benefits of AI, think about your favorite movie as a kid. You know, so for me, Rocky, Godfather, whatever. Would you want a sequel? Because with AI, they can take some of that footage, ChatGPT can write the next script, and then they can take the CGI of Sylvester Stallone or Michael Corleone, who was that, Al Pacino, and you have a Godfather 4. And so think about that. Like,
you could have a personalized Godfather 4.
That's true. That's
true.
That's
what's crazy about it, because you can throw in some of your own opinions, values, whatever it may be, and then you can, and an epic, by the way, you can have your own epic sequel.
And you could go in.
You could somehow pay for that, because
you can go in with goggles and you're in the metaverse version of Godfather 4, and you're interacting. You are in the movie. It's a game.
Yeah. I think that's where Apple's going. They're releasing, as you know, their headset, and it should be interesting because they like to do things right. It should be really interesting. So I want to follow.
I have a startup called MetaTraffic, and the whole point is when you're at that level, when you're going into a 3D reality, whether you're in a game,
Mixed
whether you're
reality, you call it, right?
Yeah, mixed reality. Whether you're in a shopping experience, if you're going into somebody's, a $30 million apartment in New York City, right now we're already doing brand sales in these 3D applications. So you could walk into the showroom and really take a look at the product, and you could buy it. There was no data tied to it. You couldn't tell who was coming in, what they were looking at, and when I say who, demographics, not the specific person.
Yep.
What they're looking for, what they're clicking on, and if they bought something. So our company built the data analytics engine for these 3D spaces. Think about walking down the street with a pair of Apple glasses when they come out, and there's facial recognition technology. And I'm like, I can't remember this guy's name. Oh, it's Kevin, because my glasses told me.
Yeah, that's
it's going to be right. Especially as we get older, it's going to happen more and more. There's plenty of people I know their name, and I've known them for years.
Happens all the time.
You have a brain fart. You know,
right? Really cool. Back to money. And I've asked you this a few times, and I want an update on this. Right. So $20 million to build out this lab museum. There's maintenance beyond that, of course. Now, $20 million is a lot of money, but it's not by today's standards, it's really not a lot of money at all. We know condo complexes that are 50, 100 million.
Exactly.
One just south of us, by the way. So the question becomes, people have made an enormous amount of money in the last 4 years. Why isn't this money just being thrown at us?
It's just
or is it? And you just as executive director, you want to kind of do it right because you don't want to be owned. I mean, I don't know if I have the right words here.
No, I will say that we are at it every day, meeting with people that of means that typically would donate to a science center or a project like this, whether they're on Long Island or they're on the West Coast or. It's a process, and they are hit up by so many organizations and so many good causes that there's definitely competition.
Or is it the proof of concept, meaning this is open 2-3 years, and you're able to show, hey, 100,000 people have visited this in the last year. And this is the reality. And now you have the opposite problem where people are like, let's expand this and let's do this.
Well, so the couple of things there is when we're fully built out on the $20 million project, we're looking at about 22,000 square feet. Our market analysis suggests that we need about 30,000 square feet. So we know we'll have to add some square footage elsewhere.
How many square feet is the lab?
10,000.
Okay.
So if you take that, you take the 2,000 square foot visitor center, and then we have a 10,000 square foot another metal building that's the only other building on site that
which will stay.
Yeah, that'll stay. It's got high ceilings and it's perfect for exhibition.
Is that on the western side?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's an old water treatment plant, but
right.
it's easier and cheap to get that functional again. So we know that we're going to need some additional square footage, but I don't think we'll ever need to be a 100,000 square foot science center like the Liberty Science Center in Jersey. One, because of our proximity. So we're talking about 180,000 visitors a year, not 500,000. But number two, we're going to do highly immersive exhibition. So after we get past that Tesla, that I said small footprint of his old lab,
the physical, right?
The rest is going to be highly immersive.
Gotcha.
That is going to take you a while to get through. And then finally, 50% of what we do is going to be virtual. We are going to be a hub where you're going to be able to walk into the metaverse and then into the Tesla lab and have different experiences.
Right.
But there's more than enough room to grow.
Plus the reality on the 16 acres, then when people are there, you actually, I hate to say it, you need parking.
That's right. That's right.
It's simple as that,
That's
right? Because the train is not going there anymore. It would be great if it
it would be great.
Are you pushing in that direction at all?
Well, no.
That's tough.
When I was in office, I was a lone voice saying,
electrification.
Yeah. Why not have electrification? Why not have the train go?
I wish they listened to you back then.
It would be great for all the communities across the railroad, but it's not going to happen. They are talking about electrification to Yaphank, so there'll be a train to about 2 miles south of us, and then you can take shuttles. But yeah, there's. We can only get so big. The one thing is there is infrastructure. We are about a mile away from William Floyd Parkway, which is a limited access highway that goes right down to the LIE. So traffic is not an issue. All that's been studied. And we're talking about a few thousand visitors a week, but that's spread out. Right. So we've had at one time 3,000 people on site, and traffic wasn't an issue. And we're not going to.
No, it wasn't.
And that's a really big event for us. We're not looking to get bigger than that. And so it was funny. I went to the Civic Association the day after that, or 2 days after that. And a woman, I gave a presentation on what's going on with Tesla. And a woman raises her hand. She's like, I live behind the Tesla Science Center. Yeah. You had a really big event the other day. I'm like, oh God, this is going to be bad. She's like, you guys did such an amazing job. And I was like, all right, so if our immediate neighbors are happy when we had the biggest event we're ever going to have, then everything else is gravy.
Yeah, you're going to fly right through it. That's awesome. Great update, Marc. Awesome. So good. I want you to come in a little more often.
Yeah, this is great.
As I said, we'll show some background pictures for this to show you just exactly what's happening as the Science Center goes through the process. Updates, of course, are on the Facebook page, probably most often, teslasciencecenter.org. Marc Alessi, Executive Director of the Tesla Science Center. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.